Hey there, welcome back to the Expedition Marriage Podcast. We are so glad you're here today because we're diving into a topic that's incredibly important: betrayal trauma and how it affects our nervous systems. If you have ever felt the sting of betrayal, whether it's from your spouse, a close friend, or even a family member, you know just how life-shattering that can be. It's a pain that can run deep. It leaves you questioning everything and sometimes everyone around you. But here's the thing: betrayal doesn't just mess with our emotions, it also has an impact on our bodies, especially our nervous systems. That's why we're grateful to have Dr. Christine Baker back with us today. Dr. Baker is a trauma specialist and somatic therapist who has spent years helping people heal from the deep wounds of betrayal. She's here to shed some light on what happens to our nervous systems when we experience betrayal, why it's so hard to break free from the cycle of pain, and most importantly, how we can begin to heal. So, whether you're in the midst of dealing with betrayal, trying to support a loved one, or simply want to understand more about how our bodies respond to deep emotional pain, this episode is for you. Trust me, you don't want to miss this conversation. So let's get started.
Dr. Christine Baker, thank you so much for coming back. Welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, I'm so happy to be back, and I'm super excited about our topic.
No, it's this is good stuff. Yeah, in fact, guys, if you didn't listen to last week's podcast, listen to that episode. There's so much great information from Dr. Baker that we had to have her back on. In fact, we've asked her if she could be on the next two episodes because there's just so much good stuff that we're wanting for her to share with us today.
Yeah, and I love that because today we're talking about betrayal trauma and the nervous system. And like, this is your jam, the nervous system
is.
stuff. Like, this is what you're all about. And I love that because it's not really what we're about, but I want to be about this stuff because I'm learning the power of it in my own life. And I just, you're my favorite go-to educator on the topic.
Oh, thank
So
you.
we are thrilled to have you here. But before we get started with this episode on betrayal trauma, I want to clarify that this is not an episode that's just for those who have been betrayed. This is for, and we're primarily going to talk about this in the context of marriage, and we'll get into this in a little bit because I've got some questions for you about this. But it is, if you're in a situation and if you think about, I think this episode title is going to attract a lot of maybe couples who have experienced adultery. Adultery, pornography, that type of betrayal. And we're certainly going to speak into that. But this episode is not just for the spouse who's been betrayed. It's to help the person who has been the betrayer because a lot of those couples do heal and recover. And we work with many of them, but it is a journey.
Yeah.
And I think what you're going to share today is going to be so impactful. But just to clarify, this episode is for everybody. And even broader than that, and I want you to speak into this as well, the betrayal is not just adultery or pornography addiction and stuff. There is betrayals that can happen in our childhood that affect our marriages.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
don't underestimate this episode and the depth
Don't write it off.
all that it's going to bring because it really is. If you are a breathing, living human being, this episode is probably for you.
Yeah, it'll help normalize what looks really odd and give it better context so you know what's really going on instead of what you're assuming is going on, and then you'll react to it much better and more productively.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know what comes up for me when you guys say that is I think so the first piece about this is also for the person who has betrayed, who has been the betrayer, if we want to say that. My hope, my prayer for this episode is that we can really create trauma-informed spouses.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, okay, how can we help the person who has hurt their partner become super trauma-informed so that they can respond in ways that are actually helpful to their spouse's nervous system. So that's one piece. And then two, I love that you're bringing up, and I'm so happy. This was actually the very first thing I put on my notes is that betrayal trauma is not just infidelity. I think there is a lot that can happen in a marriage. Infidelity, porn addiction, you've mentioned, financial deception being one that I deal with a lot as well. But there's also so much that can happen in childhood, like a parent abandoning a child
Yeah.
or sexual abuse by a trusted adult, emotional manipulation from or gaslighting from a close family member, maybe even like a religious leader
Wow.
abusing their
Mm,
position of trust. I think it's really important to hold all of that because okay, so maybe a couple comes to you guys because one person has been unfaithful, but who knows? Potentially both people are betrayal trauma survivors from
Right.
their
yeah.
history. So there's so many pieces to this puzzle that need to be acknowledged, I guess. So I'm glad you're bringing that up.
Yeah, and I love that, and I think from the marriage component of it, there's lots of it's kind of anytime, like, what we vow at the altar when we get married, if we start going against those vows, if we stop showing
Yeah.
up for our spouse, if we don't let our yeses be yes, if we're lying, and saying yes when we mean no, when we're constantly disappointing or
Hmm.
deceiving, even if
Yeah.
they're smaller, over time, those can really add up. And so just like going astray from what we vowed to one another at the
Yes.
altar, those can be little types of betrayal. And I'm sure there are obviously adultery. It's
Mm,
going to be a bigger,
Yeah.
more impactful,
sure.
betrayal. But those little ones over time are like you're saying, a parent not being available, something
Yeah.
like that, like continued betrayal. I mean,
Yeah.
that can really add up. And so we don't want to really put these in a box all collectively, but they can all be impactful, right?
Right. Death by a thousand cuts. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I know. Well, and I think the way that I like to think about betrayal trauma, if we wanted to put a
Yeah.
definition
That was
on
going to
it,
be my question. What is it?
yeah.
Let's talk about what betrayal trauma is.
Yeah, and I hope that this definition even helps kind of tie together what we've been saying, all these different examples. So, betrayal trauma occurs when someone we depend on for survival or are significantly attached to violates our trust in a fundamental way.
Wow.
And this type of trauma, I'm kind of jumping a little bit into my world, the nervous system.
Yeah.
It uniquely impacts the nervous system because it creates this really biological paradox. Because the very person that we instinctively want to turn to for comfort is now the source of distress,
Mm,
right?
Yeah.
So it's like this person that was supposed to be my place of safety for my attachment system is now my threat.
yeah.
And so, what do I do with that? My
Wow.
nervous system is set up to find safety,
Well,
right? And so, oh my goodness, where do I find safety now? You can see how dysregulating that would be for someone.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the first goals that we have for people who come to us, especially with adultery, right? It's just like just wrap your head around it. And like you were just
Yeah.
saying, how do you wrap your head around the person who I depend on for safety is now not safe, but I want them to be
Mhm.
safe, but they're not safe.
Yeah. So it
Mhm.
basically equals to I have no safety. And so what
Exactly.
happens in the
Whoa,
nervous
desperation.
system when you're in that
Yes.
situation of betrayal where it's like, it's not just that I've been hurt by this, it's that I've been hurt in a way that has removed my safety. So
That's right.
what differentiates, I guess what I'm saying, what differentiates betrayal trauma maybe from
Yeah.
a different form of trauma?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that one big piece is like we just said, this biological paradox of I depend on you for safety. Now you're my source of threat, which is going to have a deep impact on the nervous system. But it's also different from other forms of trauma because of the relational nature of
Sure.
it. So while a lot of traumas can activate our survival response, betrayal trauma specifically disrupts our attachment system.
Mm.
Mm.
And so that could be a whole nother podcast. Let me tell you, like the attachment system, nervous system. But this typically can lead to a more pervasive dysregulation of the nervous system. So not just those kind of typical dysregulations that maybe we even talked about last time, like anxiety, depression, mood swings, sleep issues, but it's also affecting our ability to form relationships, which is vital
Yeah.
to like human flourishing, you know? And so this thing that our body knows we have to have to survive and be okay is completely disrupted.
Mm.
Mm.
And that is super significant. And I'll probably say this a lot today, y'all, but I want to even kind of start our time bringing this up. For someone who has experienced this kind of trauma, when they pull away or keep distance from someone, that's not the person just being difficult or just saying, I can't move on from this. I hear that all the time in my office. It is literally their nervous system trying to keep them safe.
Mm.
So instead of pushing them more into connection, like, you just have to get over. I hear this all the
Mhm.
time. My partner has to get over this. Like, we've got to move forward with our relationship. We can't stay stuck in the past. Instead of that, what if we asked ourselves, what can I do to help them feel safe in this moment?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know, verbally ask the question,
Yeah.
like that is what actually is going to move us forward.
So are
So
are there common things that tend to be more helpful to calming the nervous system during those?
yeah, I mean, I think a huge one is validation
Mm.
of their experience, because quite often with betrayal trauma, there's been so much gaslighting that's
Mm.
happened that the person who's been harmed by it, they no longer trust their gut at all. So much of the work that I do with clients when we're recovering from betrayal trauma is learning to trust our gut again.
Mm.
And so if your partner comes to you and says, like, oh, you're traveling again and it makes me feel afraid. Instead of being like, look, I've been in recovery for 12 months. You need to be okay with me traveling
Well,
again. Instead of that, what if we responded with, goodness, honey, that makes so much sense that this feels scary to you. What can I do to help you feel safer during this trip? Could I call when I get there and when I get back to the hotel each night? Let's brainstorm safety building activities.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that's a huge one, validating their experience, safety building activities, and I would say rhythms of safe connection.
Mm.
This is super practical. I hope it's okay for me to
No,
Oh,
get
that's
into
yeah.
this.
what
Like,
that is what when I pulled on Instagram, what question
yeah,
that's it. It's like help me and how.
yeah,
How
okay,
what do we do? So be practical.
yes. Okay, so I will actually send this PDF to y'all so you can put it in the show notes
Perfect.
so people don't have to pull over the car and write notes about this. But one of the things that a ton of my clients use that I love is the Fanos check-in. Have you guys heard of this?
No, what is it
Mhm.
called again?
Okay, so it's Fanos. It's an acronym and it's
Okay.
FANOS.
Have
Okay.
not heard.
And so F stands for feelings. So you just share your feelings for the day. A stands for affirmation. You affirm your partner in something. N stands for need. You share with your partner what you need. O stands for own. You take responsibility or say sorry for something. And then S, this was originally created in the addiction world, so it stands for sobriety.
Mm.
Mhm.
Okay.
But if you're not working with an addiction, you could do a spirituality check-in
Oh,
or something like that. But so this Fanos check-in, the idea is that the person who has betrayed their partner, they will bring it up every day.
mhm.
So it is their responsibility to say, hey, could we do our Fanos check-in today? And I cannot tell you what a gift that has been to my clients who are recovering from betrayal trauma,
Mm.
because what that is it is every day their partner is showing them that connection with them is important.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so it can't become the person who is betrayed is nagging the other partner. Can we do our Fanos? Like, that is just going to hurt the whole
Sure.
situation. But if you are really trying to rebuild trust with your partner, having some kind of check in, it could be Fanos or it could even just be what are your top 3 feelings today?
Mhm.
Having that is something that you bring up every day. So
I
a rhythm of connect.
Love it.
I love that. But I also want
Mhm.
to take it a little bit deeper with that because I know as soon as you said that, if you're the spouse who has done the harming, you went,
Mhm.
I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to bring that up because now I'm just like, I'm asking them to be upset again. I'm asking to have a half an hour long conversation and all that. But that
Oh, such a good point.
yeah, but that's not true
Yeah.
because this is the stuff that gets in front of that.
Yeah.
And it actually will, and it may, I mean, if we're honest, it may, especially in the beginning,
Yeah. Especially at first.
it may be a little bit triggering, but even if it is, it would still be good to do, correct?
Yeah. Yes, and I have a couple thoughts about that. So one, what I say to my because I'm also a CSAT. I don't know if we talked about that the last time. So that means I'm a certified sexual addictions therapist. So I work a
Okay.
lot with the betrayal trauma world. And so when I'm working with my clients struggling with sexual compulsivity, so the people that have done the
Well,
betraying, and they say something like this, like, I don't want to do a Thanos. It's just going to remind her of how
Yeah.
much I hurt her. My response is, honey,
She knows.
she's there. He's there. Or I'm not going to be specific to gender. He's
Right.
there.
yeah.
It's already there. You addressing it is validating her experience
Mm.
or his
Mhm.
experience, you know? And so that's one thing I would say is like, it's already there.
Mhm.
All you're doing is giving space for you guys to connect in the midst of that hard.
Yeah.
And then two, the other thing I'll say is I do have some specific rules around the Thanos when I give this to clients. One is that this is not a 30-minute conversation. So there is 5 letters. And so I would say no more than 5 or 10 sentences.
Mm.
Okay. So it is not a super long, drawn out thing. It is very structured because we want there to be structure to this rhythm, because reconnecting with someone who's hurt me like this is really scary.
Yeah.
And so I nervous system is going to feel more settled with more structure.
Yeah.
So that's one piece, is it is going to be short. And and I've told clients, set a timer. If we need to set a timer, that's totally fine. And then the second thing is, this is super hard to do, but I tell people, when someone shares, you don't respond to that share until 48 hours later.
Mm.
So like, let's say that I said to my husband, hey, I'm feeling unimportant because I asked you to take the trash out and you didn't. He can't respond right then and say, well, I took it out at dinner time, you know? So if 48 hours later, it still bothers him that I said this in the check-in, then he can come back later on and say, hey, when you said this, it really upset me because I actually did take it out. It was just not at the exact time that you said. And so the idea behind that is we want to help make the Thanos check-in be as contained and safe and not something that we're trying to avoid. And if we're fighting every time we do the Thanos, we're not going to do
Sure.
it, you know?
Yeah, and to Jamie's point, and I love that because there are, and I don't want to make it just about guys, right? But the guys tend to be a lot more avoidant than the females in our experience, especially around this. And you nod, which is okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. And so there is but that's what's I find interesting about this discussion, because a lot of that avoidance is their own nervous system dysregulation and fears around that, even though they're the offending, they're the ones who caused the offense, that they still have their own nervous system to deal with. So I could see, if you don't have these guardrails, if you don't have this containment, then okay, I ask
Yes.
questions that I'm already nervous about, so I'm already kind of loaded for bear. And then
And it backfired.
yeah,
Yeah.
it backfires. Well, I was just reaching out. I was just trying to be nice, and now we are further separated than when we were before.
100%.
Yeah, and I can see how beneficial this will be, because what you had said, the difference between like regular trauma and betrayal trauma is like what it does to us relationally. And so
Yes.
this short,
Mhm.
abbreviated discussion, one, it does the validating. It says, I care that you're hurting
Yes.
and I want to lean into your pain and be in it with you and be an ally and kind of, but also just having the engagement of the discussion, you're restoring that relationship.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And it reminds me too of this beautiful quote. And oh my gosh, I'm not going to get it correctly off the top of my head, but it's Peter Levine. And it's something like, what makes something a traumatic experience is going through it without an empathetic witness.
Mm. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know, y'all.
Yeah.
So good. And so it's like, obviously betrayal is traumatic. We're not going to take that away. But if we can support like wellness and safety through empathetic witnessing of that experience, it's huge, man. That's so huge.
Yeah. So so it's not just the problem that you went through that pain; it's that you're isolated and
You're alone in it now.
Oh, 100%. And even thinking about so many of our sweet brothers and sisters in the Christian kind of world that are dealing with this, that wouldn't feel safe going to their small group or their pastor or whatever to talk about betrayal. They're even more isolated,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know? And so,
and there's also a lot of harmful messages out there. There are
Oh,
some
yeah.
well-meaning but misinformed pastors, misinformed even counselors especially in
Yeah.
the Christian world and stuff. And so they
Yeah.
could go for help and then get harmed again. And then there's another level of betrayal on it. So this is
Yeah.
really important. So talk about like how would somebody know? Obviously, they're going to know that they've been hurt if a betrayal has happened. But what happens to their nervous system? Maybe like how does that fight, flight, or freeze manifest? How does that come to play? What kind of nervous system changes do they
Yeah.
have when betrayal has happened? That way, I just want people to hear like this is normal.
Mhm.
Because
Yes.
it's not you not forgiving, it's not you making a big deal because like you said, there it oftentimes is a lot of gaslighting there.
Yes.
And I do also, to go back just a little bit, I love that you brought up how because we've heard this a lot, people who feel like I can't trust myself
Yeah.
anymore. It's like, I thought I had safeguarded this. I thought this wasn't gonna be a problem. I never said I would. I said I never would put up with something like that,
Right.
and yet here I am. And so they've lost the safety in the relationship, but then they've also on a whole deeper level lost the safety that they had with themselves. That they don't even feel like
Yeah.
I
So
can
well
be a
said.
safe person for myself
Yeah.
anymore. So all of those things can spiral us, and I would imagine
Yeah.
spiral our nervous system. So I guess talk
Yeah.
about what that does. What does that look like when all of that happens and your world just gets flipped upside down?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that that's so well said about not only can I not trust my safe person, I feel like I can't even trust
Mhm.
myself. Uh, and I think that that is why nervous system regulation is vital
Sure.
in this world because it's like I believe, and I know I'm biased, but I believe that this work is what helps you feel safe in your own body
Yeah.
again.
Mm.
I really do, and I think it is specifically aimed at that goal. And so I think that that is incredibly important for people that have experienced betrayal trauma is being able to find safety in our own body
Mhm.
again. Okay, so let's talk about the nervous system and betrayal, like in kind of two different ways. I want to talk first about that first moment when you find out what's happening in your nervous system,
Mhm.
Okay.
and then we can kind of talk about some common signs of dysregulation after you've experienced betrayal trauma. So, when a person first experiences betrayal in a close relationship, the typical response is a state of shock. And so if we want to talk about fight, flight, freeze, this would be our freeze response. And so that person typically goes pretty numb or dissociative. The really important piece to remember here, and I talk to my clients about this all the time, is that because of that, because we go into shock, we can't guarantee that our partner or the person that we're disclosing to is going to remember everything that is
Mm.
said.
Mm.
Mhm.
So something that's so common is that the betrayer finally comes to a rock bottom. They disclose everything to their partner, and then 6 months later, the partner's like, "You never told me about that."
Oh my goodness,
And
that
and
happens all the
All the
time.
time.
All the time.
yes,
Mhm.
yes, and then the person who is betrayed is like, "Yes, I did," and then now we've got another rupture. And so if we can understand that's, and it's like, well, no one else was there. We don't know for sure, but here is a possibility that you might have been a bit dissociative because that's what our nervous system does with something as traumatic as this. And so that is one piece. I don't want to use that as an
Sure.
excuse for people to say I said something when they didn't, but I do think it's an important piece
Mhm.
to understand. I think it also can trigger a really intense sympathetic response, which would be that fight or flight.
Mhm.
And so the person may have a panic attack, that would be more flighty, or the person may rage and throw a bowl at your head, which would be more
Yeah.
fighty, you
Yeah.
know? And so, and that is all nervous system reactivity to such an intense trauma in the moment. So that's kind of like my thoughts on like first moment of hearing about the betrayal. And then when we think about to kind of try to normalize symptoms after learning about betrayal trauma, I think some of the things that I see so often are emotional volatility or like the ups and downs, the really intense emotions. What again, whether that be anxiety and panic and obsessive.
Would
Uh,
hypervigilance fit into this category?
yeah, I was thinking like detective mode.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
I see that so much in my
Mm.
sweet clients, and so I think that's a huge piece. I think we see a lot of sleep disturbance, especially when that if we're talking about infidelity, that partner is still sleeping next to you.
Sure.
That threat is so close. And so your body's going to have a really hard time settling down into rest. Now, that's not to say that you have to sleep in different bedrooms, but I'm just saying, like, that is a piece of the
Yeah.
puzzle here. Uh, the sleep disturbance is big, difficulty concentrating because your brain is so distracted and probably even fuzzy from all of the freeze that's present, a ton of physical symptoms. And so we see a lot of, and I don't know if I said this in the last podcast, but this is something that was so helpful for me when I first started this work. Is one of my teachers told me that trauma is typically held in the midline of our body. So think head, chest, stomach, pelvis.
Right.
And so many of trauma symptoms, like physical trauma symptoms, are going to be in that midline. And so I see a lot of migraines. I see a lot of heart palpitations. I see a lot of gastric issues. And then obviously we see a lot of pelvic issues, pelvic floor dysfunction, pelvic pain. And so all of that can be really common for people that have experienced betrayal trauma. And then, like you said, I had in here hyper arousal, heightened startle response, all of that, because their nervous system is on such high alert because they were so shocked before. The floor's been ripped out from under them. And so they're constantly looking for the next moment that could happen, you know? So those are some initial thoughts.
Yeah, because we definitely see that you were saying obsession before that like, oh, I just got to check the phone. I just got to check the phone and I'll be okay. And then that compulsion, so then they'll take it and they'll check it. Okay, all right. There's nothing there, and at least for 5 minutes until they're like, but did it just go off? I think I heard it vibrate. Maybe I can,
Right.
and just
And so this is something that because we talk a lot about the body keeps score, which comes from the book and stuff, but it's what's happening. So this stuff isn't going to, because I think, especially in the Christian world, there's a lot of, we can fall heavy on forgiveness. Oh, wait, I need to forgive.
Yeah.
And I feel wrong, especially with women. I feel wrong for not forgiving.
Yeah.
And I'm getting guilted and maybe rushed through my healing process by not necessarily ill intentions from your spouse, but that's what's happening. So there comes a tendency to go, let me shove all this down and just walk in forgiveness because I should get over it. But this isn't going to go away on its own. Like if you don't address betrayal trauma, what happens to it? Did you have something?
Well, I was going to say, I think this is possible part of the isolation as well, and not reaching out to life groups and other people because I'm not supposed, I don't want it to, not necessarily even, the own embarrassment possibly, but I don't want to blow up my spouse and and paint them and shame them and paint them in a bad light, especially if I want to reconcile. So here's the kind of thing. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, please.
Yeah. So what happens to it if there's somebody who has a tendency to go, you know what, I just need to suck it up and deal with this and move forward?
I know. I think typically what I would see in those clients would be a lot of physical symptoms because what is that saying? The body expresses what the mind suppresses.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think I've heard that before. Yeah. And so it's like your body's going to respond to this pain even if you choose not to address it. And so I think that's one thing that we're going to notice. I think quite often you'll also see a lot of depressive symptoms because if I'm kind of stuffing, if we want to say that, some other language we might use there is like numbing. And so I think we could see a lot of depression kind of stuff, and then a lot of anxiety as well, because it's like I'm not actually finding safety again. In reality, I'm pretending I am, but I'm not fully doing it. And so that hypervigilance is still going to be on board.
And as you're sharing this, I know it's really hard stuff to go through, but what a beautiful design by God. To go, I have made your body to force you to find healing, to force you, to alarm you when things are not as they should be, because God wants healing. He wants reconciliation and restoration for us. And so he's going, if you don't deal with this, I'm going to make your brain let you know. I'm going to give you a little bit of chronic pain. I'm going to give you some anxiety, but I'm going to give it to you as a gift that's telling you deserve and need healing. And I want that healing and wholeness. for
Yes.
you. So I love that.
Yeah, and all of this, what I'm hearing is the couples who try to just bury it and push on. Yeah, we dealt with it, but they didn't really deal with it. They, that tends, or what sounds like, is probably going to be more detrimental than going
There's no
through.
restoration of
Yeah,
relationship.
going through the struggles and the
Yeah.
pain to reconcile right then.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's no safety rebuilt. I think that's like the word that just stands out so much to me with nervous system work. It's all about safety. Your nervous system is scanning for safety and threat. And so if I'm avoiding dealing with some trauma, betrayal trauma or otherwise, I'm not dealing with this threatening thing. It's just lingering around. My body still thinks that it is here. And
Right.
so it's going to continue to respond like it's here. And so I think the big work, and even thinking about forgiveness, I think the big work is, how do we determine if this relationship is safe again? And then once we get there, then let's talk. And this, I don't know, theologically may be inaccurate, but then let's kind of dig into the forgiveness piece.
Right.
We're bringing back connection with this person based on the level of safety that's there.
Yeah, and well, to
That would
your
be
point, theologically, forgiveness that is forced isn't really forgiveness. And so it's
100%.
totally
Yeah. Yes.
okay to go, I need to process, I need to find a little bit of healing.
It's a
I need
journey.
to, yes, get my bearings. And then I can
That's
start
right.
on the free. So it's not I'm unwilling to forgive. I'm just not ready. I need to do some prep work to get ready for
Yes.
that. So what do the couples do, or what I won't even say couples, what does the person do when in an ideal world, when restoration is possible, and even if it's with family, with a friend, with your parents or your spouse, when restoration is possible, that's great. You can restore the relationship as part of that healing process. But what about when you can't? What about the person who's like, no, my wife had an affair, my husband had an affair, and they're gone, or it's just they've done it multiple times and I'm done. It's over,
Yeah.
or my mom, I can't heal this relationship. So how do they, since the relationship restoration is kind of a part of this, or that I guess
Yeah.
restoration isn't necessarily
Yeah.
needed,
Yeah.
but how do you heal relationally when you kind of can't because that person is
With that
toxic?
person.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally. Yes. Yes. I mean, I think that there's so much nervous system work, which interacts with the attachment system. There's so much nervous system work that can happen on an individual level. And so I think a big first piece is learning to trust your gut again, start to recreate safety with your own body, your own self. And then once that's there, then we can do some psychoeducation and some learning around signs of safety for future relationships, and like working with a therapist or a 12-step group around what does a healthy relationship look like? And then as you're kind of learning those things, you're using your body as a assessment tool as you continue to build future relationships. So you've got this knowledge now, and now you get to go practice embodying it. So it's like, okay, I now know that a healthy relationship is one that is reciprocal. Okay. So then I go hang out with a friend who just talks about herself the whole time and doesn't ask me any questions about myself. And I start to notice that my chest feels really heavy when I'm with her. And so I'm starting to use my body, my gut. So we're restoring that, right? To help assess for future relational safety. Does that make
Red
sense?
flags. Yeah, because I think
Yeah. For red flags. And even the other side too. When I'm with a friend who is very reciprocal, noticing how warm and connected I feel inside and learning to trust that too.
yeah, and I think because there are situations where maybe there's a lot to learn about yourself, and there's work that maybe when you got into the relationship, it had some red flags that you ignored. And so learning
Yeah.
like, hey, what are the like you're talking about right there, like they only care about themselves and things like that.
Yeah.
But then there's also the aspect of, whoa, that was a total blindside. Like I had no
Yeah.
idea, because we hear that too, where our marriage was great. This
Yes.
relationship was good, and then all of a sudden something happened. But either situation, it seems like you've got to learn how to trust yourself again, and even
Yes.
trusting God to go, I cannot control, if I'm
Mhm.
blindsided, I can't help that, but I can trust myself that I know how to heal and how to handle this. And I can trust that
Yeah.
the Lord's going to be with me in it, because let's be real for a minute. Nobody understands betrayal like Jesus does.
Ooh, yeah.
That's so true.
I
So
mean,
true.
nobody ever will be as betrayed as he was. And he's the one who walks through all of this betrayal
Mm.
with
Mhm.
us. And
Yeah.
so, and I think it's important that we do learn to trust ourselves for safety, but our ultimate
Yeah.
refuge is in Christ.
Mm.
Yeah.
And that's
Yes.
important to remember as well.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Great point. I was
Mhm.
thinking that as you're going through this, I mean, are there things for people to look out for? Like, hey, here's some of the signs. Here's some of the things that are going. Hey, I'm making progress.
Mhm.
Or
Mhm.
even if
Oh,
I'm
good question.
doing it alone, or if I'm doing it with my spouse, here's the ways
How
to
do I know I'm
know.
getting better?
Yeah, yeah, we're on the right track.
Yes, I love that. So I would say increased periods of feeling safe and calm.
Mm,
Mm.
So
mm,
I think when you first experience betrayal trauma, you're very aware of how unsafe you feel most of the time.
mm,
And so you start to notice that there's more moments where you're able to take in safety. Like I think about even something as simple as like stepping outside and watching a tree blow in the breeze, which I know makes me sound like such a hippie. But if I can do that and just like take in that that's beautiful and have a moment of that,
mhm,
like okay, this is good. We're moving forward. I think that's a piece. I think the ability to understand your triggers and be able to soothe
mm,
your nervous system when those triggers occur. I think that's a big one. Um, I think greater capacity for intimacy
mm,
and trust
mhm,
in relationships because you're starting to heal some of that attachment wounding that's happened. Better sleep,
yeah,
I think, is a big one too. That's a pretty practical one. And then maybe even some of like a reduction in some of the physical symptoms that may have come up during your recovery time. So those are some
yeah. No,
thoughts of things that
those are
kind
great.
of be a sign that they're moving forward.
Yeah, certainly, certainly. I apologize. Yeah, those are great because a lot of times what we'll hear is, "Well, we haven't fought for a while." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, I don't know if that's necessary." I mean, yeah, we're glad you're not
Yeah.
But we haven't
arguing.
seen each other all week.
Yeah, we've been worried.
I know. I know.
Our schedules haven't crossed, or we've just been super stressed out. It's like, oh, well, then just keep your schedule packed and
Yeah, I know. No
you'll be
kidding.
great.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
seems like this is the healing journey can be a bumpy road
Mm,
where
mhm,
the
Yeah.
triggers are there. And then I know we often have people who they're doing good and they're getting better and they're feeling more peace come back. And then all of a sudden that's the thing that scares them
mm,
because now they
mhm.
realize, oh, I just started to reconnect and now I feel vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so there is that back and forth stuff that happens. But what I'm hearing you say is like, this is a journey you want to go on to find this heal.
Yes.
You want
Yes.
to have healing because if you ignore that, you're really not going to be able to relationally restore. And that's
No.
you could have be in a marriage where an affair has happened and it's ended in divorce and you marry somebody new 10 years later and this stuff is still going to
Rear its ugly head.
come into play. And so
Yeah.
Mhm.
it's worth doing the work. It's worth it for us. It's work God wants us, to
Wholeness and
do.
healing?
I know, wholeness and healing. I know he's like that. What would you
Yes.
say to start wrapping this up here? So, what advice
Yeah.
would you give to somebody who really feels stuck in this cycle of
Yeah.
nervous system dysregulation?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. First thing would be to start to learn your own nervous
Mm,
system.
mhm,
After you have some wisdom about your own nervous system and what it needs and the places that you typically go fight, flight, freeze, fawn, whatever, then start to build a toolbox of regulation
Mm,
rhythms. And so things that really work for you. So I mentioned to y'all in the last one that I get really freezy. So something that really works for me is getting outside and feeling either the heat from the sun or the breeze on my face.
mhm.
Like it's there. It forces me to be
In
in
the
the
present.
present,
mm,
Exactly. Yeah. So figuring out like, what are those things for you? I think you have to have lots and lots of self compassion and
mm,
grace in this process,
mhm,
lots of patience. Be kind to your body and nervous system. Remember that your body and nervous system is your partner in healing. It is not trying to hurt you by having all of these symptoms. It is trying to support you.
Yeah.
And so having lots of patience with that. I think too, and I hope this is okay for me to say, y'all can take it out if it's not. But I know
We control all editing.
I know, that's right. That's right. I think a big piece here is like, okay, so let's say that someone comes to you and they're like, I'm doing all my work, I'm trying to regulate, I'm doing all this stuff, and I'm still feel like I'm a mess. I think a question you have to ask is consider if your current circumstances are supportive for healing.
Mm.
Yeah.
Is right? Like, is your partner actually trying to work towards creating safety for you? Or are they still gaslighting, minimizing, doing all of these things? Because if that's the situation that you're living in, I'm not saying it's impossible to
Yeah.
recreate a sense of safety, but like, oh,
Yeah.
that's going to be real hard.
Yeah.
But I think that has to be a piece of this conversation.
Yeah. And I love that because that's what our entire next episode is going to be
That's
about.
right.
So that was a great
Wow.
setup. And
Good transition,
Yeah.
right?
Throwing out that cliffhanger.
I know.
That's right.
That is what we're going to talk about on next episode is understanding boundaries in the nervous system, because that we deal with that all the time. And we'll talk about this in so much depth on the next episode, but that is an issue and it is really hard. There are so many people who want to get better. They want the healing with a spouse or a partner or a family member, whatever it is, who has zero intentions of changing. They're going to continue gaslighting. They're going to continue being toxic. And it's not really realistic to think you're going to get better in a toxic environment, in a toxic relationship like that. So in case you're wondering, and if that's you and those are your questions and you're in that situation, we are going to be talking about that next week on next week's episode. So look forward to that. So to wrap this up, I want to promote again, and I also want to ask you, I'm in Dr. Baker's Somatic Wellness Collective. It's a membership group where she shows up and does all this teaching and does videos, does live teachings, has guests on, does Q&As, and you get a workbook. You go through this process to kind of like heal your nervous system and also get educated on it. Now, it's not therapy. What it's not is therapy, but it is really good for healing your own nervous system. So would your Somatic Wellness Collective be good as a good side piece? That's not really the right word. It's what I'm working on.
How about adjunctive service?
There you go. Would it be good for somebody who's walking this journey? Maybe not necessarily in the very beginning, but I don't know. Maybe it is. So
Adding to the toolbox.
yeah, adding to the toolbox. That's much better.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it could be super supportive. Kind of how I mentioned, like, I think some of the first couple of steps are learning to understand your own nervous system and learning about rhythms that will support your regulation. And I think that is what the Somatic Wellness Collective is all about. Through all the different things that we do in there is about how do I understand my nervous system and how do I support rhythms of regulation? And so I think it really could be helpful to people walking this road of recovery.
Okay, that is great to know. So if that is you, go get in that group. You'll see me in there, and we're going to put the links to that
Link
group
in the show notes.
and the information about that in the show notes. But also, if you are in one of the marriages that has been affected by porn addiction or infidelity or betrayal
Financial
from
betrayal,
your spouse,
yeah.
yes, go grab that PDF that Dr. Baker was talking about. We're going to attach that as well. And go after this healing. Yeah. It's so worth it.
You need to have the healing, letting it just burying it and hoping that it never comes back up again. You're going to have zombies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. No, it's so true. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you once again for being here. I know just like the last episode, this one's going to be very well received and very helpful for a lot of people. And we appreciate the work that you do. And we're looking forward to next week as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.